my podcast, Sarah Townsend, and it's lovely to have you here. Sarah is a freelance marketing copywriter and a best-selling author. And I just heard that actually this time last year, before all this happened, Sarah, you hadn't even started writing the book. So this time last year, it was just an idea. So where did that come from?
I didn't know that it was even an idea. I wish I could pinpoint the moment where I thought, I know, I'll write a book. But I do know that certainly at Christmas 2019, it wasn't even on the table. I used to be quite outspoken about the fact that I would never write a book, because I had quite a lot of people saying to me, oh, you should write a book about copywriting. And it was kind of like, what can I add that everybody hasn't already said in their own way? So I kind of never felt like I wanted to do that. And also I write for a living. So did I really want to spend all my spare time writing? No, I don't think I did. So yeah, it just kind of happened. And then it kind of, came to fruition in a very fast and very intense way, but that's just me through and through. If I'm going to do something, I have to be 100 miles an hour, full on, 100% all the time.
Yeah. So what was it that made you go, yes, I'm going to start writing all this down? And so did you do it in sections? I know the book is divided into freelancing myths.
Yeah.
So how did it come about, and how did you start?
So the book is based, as you say, it's actually got three kind of main sections. It's got kind of an intro section and then a middle bit, which is the practicalities and the things you might need to know. And then it goes on to section 3, which is busting the myths. And the busting the myths bit was based on a blog post that I wrote in September 2019, I think. And I shared it on LinkedIn, and it was very much the heart on your sleeve reality, much as the book is, about the freelance lessons that I had learned through my 20 plus year career as a freelance copywriter. And the response to that blog post was so positive and so encouraging, and people saying, why don't we talk about this stuff? You know, we need to be more open and honest about the realities of freelance life, because it really doesn't help people when we pretend, oh yeah, you know, freedom and flexibility and work when you like and where you like and charge good money for doing the thing you love. Yeah, that's the brilliance of freelance life, but it only really works that well as long as you know the things that I share in the book. So those things took me 15 years to learn, I would say, which was pretty poor. And I don't think most people want to spend that long to become successful at what they do. So my kind of idea of sharing it was to help people get to a level of success that I feel like I've achieved now, but much quicker and with far fewer mistakes. So yeah, I just kind of was playing about with the idea of, maybe I've got something with the book. So the myths kind of adapted and changed as I was going along through the process. I found that some just didn't feel strong enough to fit into that format, the kind of the myth, the reality, and the advice. So it chopped and changed a bit. I didn't write them in any sort of order, but I did start with that kind of fundamental structure of these are the myths, and then the rest kind of bolted on around it, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I quite liked the fact as well, and this is something that I have blogged about sort of on LinkedIn and sort of put out there, is the fact that telling your story quite often gives you that kind of people are more trusting in what you're going to say if they know where you've come from, so they know what process you've been through in order to be able to have the experience and the voice, the authentic voice, to tell them how they should do things. So tell us a little bit about your story, how you came to be a freelance person, and also the writing. Is the writing something that you've always done? So how did you start?
It's a very long story, and I do go into a bit more detail in the book in the kind of intro section, because as you say, it's that thing that kind of qualifies me, I guess, to write it. And I did have a bit of feedback from somebody when I sent out my kind of draft manuscript saying, oh, you know, I feel like this section is too long and it's not really relevant. And I was kind of like, but it sort of is. I think it's very easy to get defensive over that kind of thing, isn't it? But I think it is relevant. And a lot of people have said that they found that intro section really energizing, which is a strange choice of word, but a lovely word. So yeah, I basically didn't go to uni. I wanted to go straight out to work from doing my A levels, wanted to get a bit of independence that way. Was brought up in an environment where we were extremely short of money. So I wanted to kind of stand on my own 2 feet financially. Went and did an admin job for a financial services company for 3 years. Moved to another financial services company when I met my ex-husband in 1991. Worked there for a couple of years, and then their marketing department relocated up to Cheltenham from London. So I thought, oh, marketing sounds like a piece of me. I'll give that a go. It sounds quite creative, interesting. And yeah, I applied, and I kind of very much got trained on the job. I didn't have the sort of academic experience of learning the practicalities and the strategies, but I was very much trained on the job. It was kind of early 90s and training budgets were big, so I benefited from that. And then a couple of years later, I'd worked my way up to being their publications controller with my own little team, nicknamed the Coloured Pencils, because we were seen as the creatives again. And yeah, after that, they decided to make a third of their marketing department redundant. And they were offering very, very comfortable redundancy packages. So I thought, okay, I'll see if I can get a job working for our publishing company, who were based in Clifton in Bristol. Applied for a job there, got a job as an editor and an account manager, and stayed there for 3 years, then got pregnant with my daughter. And long story short, they didn't want to accommodate part-time working or remote working. So my boss actually suggested that I went freelance, and said that they would provide me with kind of proofreading and editing work to tide me over, at least in the beginning. And that went on for years, actually. I think probably the first 10 years I did bits and pieces of work for them. And yeah, that was the catalyst, actually. So I found myself very much in this position where I was doing two things I knew nothing about: being a mum on the one hand and running a business on the other hand. And it was tough times. But I took it seriously from day one. Semi-seriously, I designed my own logo using Comic Sans, no less.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of it. I had my own letterhead and my own comp slips and my own business cards.
Yeah.
And I went out there full on to begin with. I had to find some clients, and it was very much, what do I need to do? And I didn't know any of this. I hadn't learned any of this. I knew nothing about writing a business. So I guess when I started writing the book, my intention was very much to share everything that 29-year-old me would have loved to have known back then, that would have shortcut my journey to success, because I wouldn't have made the same mistakes that I made.
Yeah. I mean, I did a similar thing. I remember doing my letterheads and buying the nice paper. That was when you actually put them in an envelope and put them in the post box.
Yep.
I mean, times have changed so much now. It really is. It's unbelievable, isn't it, when you look back and you think of what we had to go through back then. No internet, no
social media, no online networking, no Zoom, no video calls, nothing. I know, it is really phenomenal, isn't it? I think actually back then in 1999, I think you and I probably would have thought this was a bit space age. You're talking to someone and they're actually not in the same room as you, but you can see them, like a hologram or something.
I had a friend that I went to, we did fashion college. We went to fashion college together, and she went off to BT and did technical stuff. So where that came from, I don't know. But I remember saying to her back in the 90s, probably 99, and she was saying, oh, we'll all have mobile phones soon. And I can remember saying to her, don't be ridiculous.
Was 9/11, was that 2001 or 2002? 2001.
Yeah.
So I distinctly remember I was freelancing for Cheltenham Borough Council at the time, and I was working in their kind of marketing department doing the design layout for their customer newspaper that went around every household in the borough. It was doing the words and the pictures, which was kind of quite fun times actually. But I remember the guy who was their kind of established graphic designer coming in and saying, oh yeah, I've just been chatting to my friend and he reckons there's going to be these things called smartphones and you're basically going to have a camera on your phone. And I was like, you what? Because I got a mobile phone really early. I remember I was working at Eagle Star, so it would have been early 90s, and I was one of the first people I knew, but I have always been a bit of an early adopter when it comes to tech.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of doesn't surprise me.
I was the opposite, I think. I mean, I'm embracing it now, but yeah, back then, like, no, I can't. But what interests me, though, from what you've just said, is that that's kind of creative. You kind of went, oh, creative. I didn't realize I was, oh, so even back then, there was something in you that wanted that creative work. So where do you think that came from?
I think there's this sort of a bit of a dichotomy in me that I've never really seen myself as being creative, and I only really recently, like I'm talking weeks ago, remembered really distinctly a conversation. I was in my grandparents' house and my mum and my nana were having a conversation about a program that my mum had seen on TV about the difference in children who were considered to be creative and those who weren't. And she said that there was this experiment where they had a picture of a dog, and they said, so they asked the children how they could change the dog. And the creative children would, the non-creative children would say, oh, well, you could make him brown instead of black, or you can give him a longer tail, or you could change the color of his eyes. The creative children were saying, oh, you could give him fleas, or you could give him a sparkly collar, and all this kind of thing. And she was using this discussion to say, my sister is completely creative and I wasn't creative at all. And I only really realized that very recently, that I've kind of been fighting against that a little bit all my life. And even though I only just recalled the conversation, it's defined me, I think, to some extent. I actually had a conversation about it with my mum the other day, and she's like, oh, well, you're completely different. And I thought, yeah, well, we are. My sister and I are very different. But having, hearing something like that about yourself at such a young age, it kind of puts you in a box.
Yeah.
And I think that, I always used to win the English prize at school, for example, for writing stories. Never been good at art, therefore am I creative, am I not? I don't know. But then I've got an eye for design, so my home is very, I don't know, you can see very much of it, but everything's very color coordinated and kind of different styles and kind of eclectic elements and things. So again, that's a type of creativity, and I've always kind of gone towards it, but I would never define myself as creative. I do a creative job, I write for a living, but I would never say, oh, I'm, the most creative copywriter, because I don't see myself as a bigger picture person. I'm a nitty-gritty detail person. That's just the way my brain is wired, and that's fine. But being a nitty-gritty detail person enabled me to put my creative idea into a format that became a best-selling book. So I guess now was the grand old age of 51. I guess now is the time where I have to actually say, well, I suppose I am quite creative, even though it's not something that I've ever described myself as.
Yeah,
It's funny,
I mean,
isn't
it is quite, it is amazing that it doesn't take much, because I think everybody looks at sort of creative people, or they look at artists, don't they? They look at musicians, they look at people that can draw a picture, they look at people that can paint, and they say, well, they are creative, they're the person that's creative. But actually what you're describing, and even with your, the kids looking at the dog, it's about what, what happens in your brain. It's not about what comes out of your fingers. It's actually, a thought process. And so how would you define creativity then, if you've only recently come to the conclusion that you are creative, and you have been all these years? What would you have defined creativity as?
I actually think that's such a difficult question, and I guess it's because I think I struggle with the answer to that, because I'm not sure I've got it clear in my head now, because I think I thought it was being artistic. Like you've just said, you're an artist or a musician or a performer of some sort. And my kids and my mum and my sister, interestingly enough, are all phenomenal at art. Whereas I can't draw for toffee. But then when I was younger, I used to create logos for companies. I remember creating an OXO logo and writing to them at the age of about 10 and saying, oh, I've come up with a new logo for you. And it was the O and the X and the O made a face with a little mouth underneath with a little tongue sticking out. And they took the time to write back to me and explain where the logo had come from, because it was PG Tips and the leaves of tea and the square OXO cube or whatever. But yeah, obviously there was some element, and I kind of always thought design is different to art, and I've been very design led. I've got a ridiculously perfectionist sort of eye for things, so I spot things like bad kerning in lettering and typography and that kind of thing. So I guess creativity is just so much wider than I had perhaps assumed, because it's also in things like how you, well, I guess how you give responses to questions. Not everybody is ever going to answer the same question in the same way. So we're all creative in our own way, coming up with ideas and brainstorming things like that. That's quite a creative process. And it might be, I always forget, is it left-brained or right-brained? I don't know.
I think left is the more creative. I don't know. Don't quote me.
So I think I've always considered myself to be quite, weirdly, I'm not a numbers person at all, but weirdly I'm quite logical, and the way I process things I consider to be quite logical rather than quite creative, because I'm quite regimented in the way I need to do a lot of things. So I have little rituals and things like this. I'm actually quite, I try not to use the term OCD now, but it's because I've read a book by somebody who has it properly, and like it's, you know, but I am ridiculously particular about the way things have to be. And I guess I kind of always saw that as being anti-creative, because it's a system and a process. So yeah, I don't think I really answered your question, but I don't think I know how to right now.
Well, in that case, then is creativity a process? I mean, it must be a process. I mean,
I guess a lot of people who are proper true artists would say, oh no, you know, it's just free form expression. Whereas I don't find it particularly easy to free form express myself.
I think it can be both, can't it? As you know, I did this creativity presentation last week, and I obviously had to write a presentation, and I was looking into different things as how, you know, what different people thought of different things of creativity. And at the end, this woman direct messaged me and said, is it, I'm confused, is it being an artist or is it problem solving? And I had to kind of think, well, actually it encompasses everything. But then if you talk about creativity in the broader sense, we create, every time we think a thought, we create that thought. So, you know, it's such a huge spectrum, isn't it? And I think people get intimidated by people that are able to draw and, you know, create wonderful music and you know, write books and things like that. So I think it's people get intimidated by that kind of creativity, but we're all on that spectrum, aren't we? We're all there somewhere.
Very much so. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's that kind of creativity that is productive. So I you know, I produced a book and I self-published, and I did every stitch of, the only thing I didn't do was the layout and the, you know, but the actual, all the marketing, all the spreading the word, all the publicity. Yes, I'm a marketing copywriter, but I usually just do the words. I don't actually get involved in spreading the word and getting the message out there for the brands that I work with. So yeah, that was all a completely new process to me, and that's something that I did myself. And in a way, you could kind of go, well, you're taking a creative look at a problem, like that lady said, and you're finding different ways, like thinking outside the box, different ways of solving a problem or a challenge.
Yeah. No, I've always seen it as a kind of a problem solving thing. It's that sort of spark of inspiration. Or I think Joseph Jaffe, who we discussed earlier, was on a guest this week, can't remember when, but he described it as productive originality, which
Oh,
basically it is, producing something,
yeah.
doing something, actually being actively doing something, but working originally. So if you're doing something that has purpose and has a meaning to it, then you are creating. As long as you're doing it with authenticity, I suppose, then you're coming up with stuff that's different. But it's doing. Even I asked my dad this, what do you think creativity is? And he said it's doing.
I like that. Nice and simple.
Nice and
I
simple.
mean, you could even, I mean, it's just, yeah, I think one thing, I'm sorry to turn it back to the book, but I think that one thing that's worth mentioning is just how important creativity is in the kind of realm of well-being and self-care. And I have to say, I never intended the book to be exclusively for creatives. It's certainly not just for copywriters, but I have to say, because of the circles that I move in social media, a lot of people who've read it have been designers, illustrators, photographers, copywriters, editors, etc. So I think that those people, and I'm including myself in this, find it often very difficult to unwind, because we love what we do and we get often so into the production and the working on the deadlines. And it's not that we feel specifically pushed or pressed by our clients to deliver. It's kind of the pressure that we put on ourselves because we want to do the best possible job. And what that often means is that we can kind of be careering towards, like, stress becomes overwhelm and then you're risking burnout. And one of the best ways to unwind is to actually get into some form of activity that creates this state of flow. I won't attempt to pronounce the guy's name who came up with that concept. It's in the book. Excuse me. But it's those things that we can get involved in, like even from doing a jigsaw puzzle or painting a picture. And I kind of always say that I don't draw, but my son's got this amazing drawing app on my iPad and it's called Procreate, and it's fantastic. You can set these documents up and create kind of kaleidoscopic images, and I love doing that. I could lose hours doing that if I'm kind of so yeah, producing something like that. But it could be gardening, couldn't it? If your thing is getting outdoors in nature and you like producing something like a beautiful border or whatever, that's creativity as well. So I think it's really important for creative people especially to take a break from their core creativity and focus on something that actually just distracts their mind and helps them press that reset button that is so necessary in kind of stress relief and proper relaxation and just taking care of yourself, really.
Absolutely. I mean, burnout was one of the words that I picked up on in your book, and how, I've been a freelancer for many years, and you do have that point of worrying where the next job's coming from, and making sure everybody's happy and doing the job properly and juggling everything else. And so that is really important to sort of let people know that actually you can do. I mean, I'm a big fan of playing. So okay. I teach drama, and I do adults. I do acting classes with adults, and that's our time to play. As much as I'm the facilitator, I'm there telling them what to do. To see them improvise, it's a joy. It's fun, and they leave after 2 hours laughing, and you can see the relief. So that's I just love that kind of idea of sort of just improvising. And I think negative self-care, I think we had a brief conversation earlier about negative self-care, and it made me remember oh yes, negative self-talk, that was it. Is it's been proven, they've done some research. I can't remember the guy's name, Dr. Charles Lim, I think was his name. He researched some hip-hop musicians and found that when they were actually improvising at music, doing their music, they managed to switch off the inner critic.
Yeah.
And that's something that improvising and playing and doing anything like that, if you're doing it effectively, if you're kind of getting lost in a creative activity, be it gardening, be it baking, that actually that inner critic disappears. So imposter syndrome, all those sort of things that we kind of beat ourselves up with on the inside. If you can play, whatever it might be, you can calm that inner critic, and it then opens you up to be more creative.
Interesting. It's funny that you mentioned that, actually, because talking about the improvisation, I actually did theatre studies for A level. My son's
Ah,
studying drama for A level now, and he's brilliant at it. But I preferred the theory to the practice, because I've got this really strong memory now that I hadn't thought about for years, of being in the drama studio, and we had to improvise being in a supermarket and stopping and having a conversation with somebody, and I thought, oh, I can't do this because I'm not creative, and I couldn't think of anything to say. And I find role playing, that kind of thing, or I did. I don't know if I still do now, because I haven't done it for 30 years. I've got to stop putting these limits on myself. But I used to find it really difficult. So I don't think that sort of play comes naturally to everybody. It's,
no.
I guess, something that you benefit from working on.
Yes, and even if I'm put in that situation where I have to improvise, I don't like it. But actually, when you kind of just let it go,
Yeah.
it's easy to say, not so easy to do. But we bind ourselves up with so many restrictions as we get
Mm,
older that we
mm,
forget how to play. Really,
mm.
it's one of those things. I would love to go back to something that I saw. I think it was on your website, and it was um, a quote by Nelson Mandela, which I love.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you talk to a man in a language he understands, it goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, it goes to his heart, which I just
Mm,
love that. So
yeah.
what do words mean to you then? Because in terms of creativity, it is an amazing way to be creative.
Mm. Yeah, well, it's the ability to change the way people think, isn't it? We're at the kind of greatest level. You've got the power to persuade and influence people, and from a marketing perspective, obviously that's really important. But it can be just something as simple as sort of making somebody have an emotional reaction in some way, so you can touch somebody's heart, or you could shock them, or you could inspire them into taking action. So yeah, it's everything, really.
So when did you discover words? When did you sort of start writing?
um I guess, I mean, I always used to get the English prize at school. I can't ever remember what for, but it was certainly something that I used to get good marks on at school. But whether I actually I, I I really don't know. I think I've always kind of done bits of writing throughout my life, but I've never felt that it was the one thing that drove me, which is weird. But yeah, it's come and gone at various stages throughout my life, but it's certainly since starting being a copywriter, it's such a focus. And I like to read in my spare time, as most people do, but I find, I was thinking about this the other day, because a lot of the subject matter that I have to write about in my job is quite technical stuff. So often people will send me documents that really, they're quite impenetrable, and they need transforming into a way that really anybody can pick up and understand. And that's something that happens a lot. And it's also the sort of challenge that I really love, because I just think it's my superpower to take complex information and make it super simple. And often it's like a translation sort of process.
Mm.
And it is quite taxing on the brain. So when I read, I tend to just pick up a bestseller, and I'm not reading anything kind of academic. And another copywriter does this thing, Catherine Wildman, called The Writing Desk, where she interviews various copywriters, asks them a range of questions. And she said, oh, what's your favorite book? And I was like, I can't really admit that, is it something by Lisa Jewell or Marion Keyes, or somebody who's kind of more of a chick lit kind of author? Whereas I was thinking that people were going to be saying like War and Peace and I don't know. So I think I settled on Pride and Prejudice, which I absolutely love. But I have to say, it's probably more the film adaptation with Keira Knightley that I've watched a million times over. Because yeah, when I'm actually reading, I prefer to read for escapism. And I just love the way that writing can create new worlds. It can take you somewhere. And especially at the moment, the
Yeah.
situation that we find ourselves in, I think reading for escapism is a great, that's not being creative, that's kind of being receptive, isn't it? But it's it's a very good way to find flow
Yeah.
for me.
Do you ever write for pleasure at the moment, or have you in the last sort of few years?
Well, writing the book was for pleasure, really. It's a weird one because it felt like it kind of wrote itself. There were bits where I was like, oh, you know, banging my head against the brick wall, but it, generally speaking, it felt like it just flowed. And like I sort of mentioned earlier, I didn't do it in the kind of, I didn't start at page 1 and finish on page 220. I chopped and changed all the time. So I would feel the creative urge, there I go again, telling me that I wanted to write a bit about imposter syndrome that day, or about what to charge, or about kind of the traits and the qualities that can help you be a successful freelancer. So I would always be going with my instinct. And I found it really thoroughly enjoyable writing the book, and so energizing. And this is why I have to very much keep a watchful eye on whether I'm like on the verge of burnout, or I'm kind of, because the adrenaline just carries me. And I go for reflexology outside of current times, but I go for reflexology fairly regularly. And I went in this one day and I just sent off the first draft of the manuscript completed to all my test readers. And I was just on a proper high, and she had to ground my energy a little bit. And she said, oh, you're a handful today. And it used to just be that when I am creating, I get so energized by it. My energy is very, very, like, last couple of weeks, various things happening. My energy has been non-existent. And weirdly, I was dreading getting back to work. I was thinking, oh, I don't feel like I can contribute to social media. I don't feel like I've got anything to say. I felt flat. My energy was like through the floor. And yesterday, when I switched my Mac on for the first time in a couple of weeks, as soon as I started working on I thought, oh, I forget every time. I forget how much I actually love my job and how great it is to be back creating again. So yeah, no, I guess I tend to kind of absorb and receive creativity more in my downtime, because
Yeah,
I am putting creativity out there
yeah.
day to day.
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. Going back to Joseph Jaffe, talking to him about Corona TV that he created in lockdown, and for him that was his release. That was, you know,
Yeah.
for his own well-being. And it feels from what you're saying that the book, that's what the book has done for you. So when you look at the book, it's the whole process went through those sort of beginning months of lockdown.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, well, it did. I mean, I think I had, so the very first lockdown was end of March last year, and I had already finished the first draft of the manuscript by then, and it was already with my test readers. So the only way that I know how to do things, this is just the way I'm wired. When I got the idea, I knew how to chuck myself in it 1,000,000%. And I was literally, I would talk in my sleep about it, and I'd be having ideas of things that I hadn't included that I wanted to include, and things that I wanted to chop out in my sleep. So it's quite potentially exhausting. And this is why I kind of have to keep a close eye on it. And this is why the focus of the book is very much take care of yourself, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And yeah, it's like putting your oxygen mask on first, isn't it? You do
Yeah.
need to take care of yourself, because otherwise you can't possibly do your best work, particularly if your work is creative. There's no reserves to give from.
Yeah.
So yeah, forgotten where we were going with that.
Yeah, no. I think it is that, you know, what through lockdown is something that's kept you going. So whether obviously the book and the process of the book, I can't believe that you wrote the book in less than 3 months and had a first draft ready to go out to readers.
Yeah, the reason I did it that way is because I gave myself, once I'd had the idea, I gave myself a month of client work. So I was writing solidly. So I know a lot of people who say, oh yeah, I've been working on my manuscript for a couple of years. I can't do it that way. When I have something that needs to be done, so for example, later this month, I am doing a presentation for Enterprise Nation about freelance survival skills. And I know when I sit down and produce the Canva slides, in fact, I've almost done them, it won't take me long to do, but it's getting the information out of here and out of here
Yeah.
into a different type of format, a format that I'm used to talking freeform like this, not questions in advance, no prep, just talking about these issues. But when it comes to structuring a presentation, that's outside my comfort zone. So I want to have it nailed like on day one, and my brain is with it. If I don't have it done in good time, I'm like the person who packs 2 weeks before a holiday, it's all that sort of thing. It's all connected, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'm doing an Open University creative writing degree at the moment.
Wow.
But it is that I get lost in it. It takes me ages, and I do a lot of procrastination. And when I did the creativity presentation last week, the guy that was sort of leading the Zoom call was, how can procrastination be creative? But to me, it is that time where you can kind of structure everything in your head. It's all in there, and then when it comes down to writing it then all comes out. Does that make sense to
I
you?
get that completely, but I wouldn't call that procrastination. I just think that's all part of the process, because procrastination has such a negative implication, doesn't it? It makes it feel like, oh, you're putting off doing it because you can't be bothered, or you can't get motivated or whatever. But I do that, but I don't call that procrastination. I just see it as part of the preparation of the process, for the process of writing. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, perhaps I won't call it that anymore. But yeah, it's that kind of going out for a walk, or
Yes.
doing the hoovering instead of actually sitting down and writing. But
that's not procrastination, I swear. Like, if I get writer's block or I'm trying to kind of solve a problem, I will get up from my desk. And this is the problem. Too many people just sit in front of their desk and expect the inspiration to strike, but it doesn't. So you need to get out and about. Like, when gyms are open, I go swimming. And I actually had the idea for, so originally the book and the blog post, I think, was called Survival Skills for Freelancers. And then it had a subtitle, How to Go Solo Without Going Loco. And the reason that worked for me, I loved that kind of loco. Like, I love that. But because the foreword for the book is written by Simon Blake, who is Chief Exec of Mental Health First Aid England, he's he has very strong, and rightfully so, he has very strong views on positive language around mental health. And I thought it was kind of playful enough to get away with. And then I thought, no, maybe not. So, but I came up with that title when I was swimming, and I often get my best ideas when I'm not thinking about them. So that is a really important part of the process. Go out for a walk on the hills or go to the beach, and you're still thinking about it. It's like it's percolating in your brain,
Yes, yeah. I mean, it is that. Yes, absolutely. So perhaps I shouldn't call it procrastination.
It's like a slow cooker. I don't know. We need to come up with a better word for it, for sure. I don't know. I've never really tried to think and put a word on it, but it's definitely part of the creative process.
Yes. And so just thinking about the creative process and work over the lockdown that we've all been through over the last few months, we have met virtually. We've never met person with the You Are the Media network.
Yeah.
And we both went to the quiz night before Christmas, which you would very creatively put together all the questions, which I thought was amazing. And thank goodness for Canva. I mean, how brilliant was that? It looked amazing.
I had to learn Canva to do that, Jackie. I'd never used Canva before, and I had to learn it to do the quiz.
See, now you've got that skill. See, I had to learn how to use iMovie and edit, which I am now, because all my classes went online. So rather than having a performance at the end of a term or a set of sessions, I recorded them on Zoom. We did it all on Zoom, and then I edited together like a little film. But
Amazing.
that's something I'm really proud of learning during lockdown. Is there anything that you have what's your takeaway from lockdown? Is it the networking? Is it Zoom? Is
Oh.
it more creative stuff?
A lot of people didn't use Zoom before lockdown. I used it loads. I'm very much about getting a sense of the person, and I find it so much easier to. It, there's a chapter in the book about fit, about working, finding the clients that are the right fit for you and for your business. And I think it's really important for me. I'm very much a visual person, and it's not just what the person looks like, it's their energy, their mannerisms, the way they speak, the way they smile. All those things are so important that I always used to steer people towards having the discovery call as a Zoom. So Zoom wasn't new for me. Zoom networking, yeah, I guess it was. But in terms of one takeaway, I, I mean, I guess I'm very, very fortunate in that I can still do my job pretty much unaffected by being in lockdown, apart from the fact that there are more people in the house, which kind of drives me crazy. Um, but yeah, I mean, I realize now that I'm very fortunate in having a job that can just adapt. But I guess in terms of learning point, I guess learning how to self-publish and market and sell a book, because that's certainly something that is a huge learning curve, by the way,
Yeah.
absolutely phenomenal. And I ended up with it within about 2 months of starting the book process with a lever arch file like this, with notes and structure and yeah, all sorts of things printed off and collected. So that's probably the biggest takeout. But also, yeah, learning how to do Canva was really important, because I guess I never really thought through what would happen after publishing the book, because I certainly never thought that people would start approaching me to run group mentoring sessions, which I'm doing for the freelance Her 100 project, for example. And I've done various Q&As live. I'm doing for the CIPR and the ITI and pro copywriters and freelance heroes and this kind of thing. And I love doing these things, loads of podcast interviews, and I love them because I love conversations, and I find conversations extremely creative. But I hadn't been asked before to put what I know into a talk format.
Yeah.
And for me, that's outside my comfort zone. So that's the new thing. I always believe in pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. So for me, that is the current thing that I'm working on. First of all, I need to get to grips with the slides, the structure, but then delivering it in such a way that has more of this kind of live free form and less kind of rehearsed reading off a slide. So yeah, I like the learning process, and I think it's super important to always learn, because it does keeps your brain so
It does.
tuned in, keeps
Yeah.
you young, I think.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I've loved doing this degree, over the last 5 years. It's something, every month I look forward to the assignment, because I know I need to start honing in and learning. And the other thing about lockdown is just the time to actually get lost in a rabbit hole of Google,
Mm,
and what can I learn today, who can I listen to,
yeah,
podcasts and all these sort of stuff. So
yeah.
yeah, I think I've loved it for that. So just before we disappear off this podcast, I have to bring up the dancing. So
Oh,
you were telling me before we started recording that you have a bit of a dance background, and at the age of 49, which I
yeah.
can't even believe you're 49, you don't even look like now, let alone back then, you qualified for the UK street dance. So
Did.
yeah, how did that come about? And dancing is, creative in itself. How have you got into
Yeah.
dancing?
Well, when I was younger, I think I touched on the fact that my family didn't have any money, but my granddad was hugely into ballet, and he used to go to, he lived in London when he was a young man, and he used to go to Sadler's Wells and watch the ballet, and he was so passionate about it. My grandparents taught me my love of dance. They used to do old time modern sequence and ballroom dancing until they were well into their 70s. And I had ballet lessons that my granddad paid for. And I actually gave them up when I kind of shot up in height, and then I suddenly felt really ungainly and it just wasn't working. But I did it for quite a few years. And then when I stopped doing that, I started going to the ballroom dance and Latin classes with my grandparents. I was by far the youngest person there. I used to dance with all the old men. And then from that, I kind of did various different types of dance, kind of found my niche in salsa for a while, did a bit of salsa teaching for a couple of years before my dad died. And then not so long ago sort of joined a street dance crew, and I've always really been into hip hop dance and break dancing, weirdly, and that kind of, not doing break dancing myself, I hasten to add, but all those movies, Street Dance and Step Up and this kind of thing, Save the Last Dance, all these movies really inspired me. And I thought, oh well, there's nothing to stop me going along to these classes. Sort of started off and really enjoyed it, but I have to say, at the age I am now, it's knackering on your joints. It's really bad. It makes me feel really old, but I've damaged my knee this year, and it's only just now starting to recover. I feel like I've lost all my flexibility, and it's kind of soul destroying, but such is life. But yeah, so I went along to these classes and we started entering with the competitions. And I have to say, I'm sure the only reason I qualified was because there was very little competition in the upper age group, shall we say. But I decided to kind of leave it on a high, and it coincided with injuries. So I just kind of dipped out at that point. But it's just quite a nice little story to be able to tell.
Absolutely.
Not something that anybody would necessarily expect.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love street dancing. I love dancing, but again, my knees are not what they used to be. But I have to say, I've discovered yoga in lockdown, and so I've been doing a little bit of Adrienne yoga every morning in lockdown. So that's what's got me through. So
for sure.
Oh well, thank you to the very creative Sarah Townsend for being on my podcast today. Tell us where people can find you.
Well, in terms of social media, I guess I'm most active on Twitter and LinkedIn, although I have to say I took a bit of a detox over Christmas and I haven't been back on a great deal. But if the easiest way to find me is go to survivalskillsforfreelancers.com, because that has links to my copywriting website, all my social media, email address, finding the book on Amazon, etc., etc. So survivalskillsforfreelancers.com.
Excellent, thank you. And I do apologise for the darkness. I've got a feeling that when I switch off from here, I will do something on my camera and suddenly it'll all go bing. I don't know what's happened. It was obviously because I've got the lights on, so apologies for that. Good luck with the book and all your endeavours going forward, and I look forward to seeing you in a Zoom room very, very soon. So thank you so much.
Lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.